too. Thanks so much, Amy. All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to iMapInvasives training for conservation districts. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Holly Miller, Program Manager at PACD. Before we begin, I want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded for training and record keeping purposes. We will be sharing the recording and a copy of the PowerPoint presentation after today's event. We will be taking questions via chat. Please feel free to place your questions in the chat during the webinar, and we will have time for Q&A at the end. If we're not able to get to all of the questions, we will gather unanswered questions and answers to send out to the attendees after the event. We will also be emailing an evaluation link to you, and we really hope you'll complete it and let us know how we did. Results from the evaluations are used by presenters and PACD to offer effective training experiences in the future. Again, thank you so much for joining us today for iMapInvasives training, and I would like to introduce our presenter for today's training. Amy Jewett is the Invasive Species Coordinator at the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. She serves as the primary coordinator and contact person for the Pennsylvania iMapInvasives program. She facilitates data entry and quality control projects, conducts education and outreach initiatives, and provides support to new and existing users. From her past involvement in both the PA Department of Agriculture's Plumpox Virus Eradication Program and the USDA's Asian Longhorn Beetle Cooperative Eradication Program, Amy has become a passionate advocate for raising awareness of the severe impacts that invasive species cause to the economy, our natural environment, and to the health and well-being of people and animals. Amy earned a bachelor's degree in agricultural science from the Pennsylvania State University with minors in horticulture, international agriculture, and leadership development. And today she's here to teach us about the world of iMapInvasives and how we can utilize the program in our counties. So without further ado, Amy, I'm going to pass it to you at this time.
Okay, thank you so much, Holly. Thanks for that great introduction. And welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today and taking part in our training and learning about iMapInvasives. As I was looking at the attendee list as folks were coming in today, I recognized a few names that I know are familiar with IMAP already. So for some of you, this training may be just a refresher for you, and for others, you might be coming at this from the start. You've not used it before. But either way, however you're coming at today's training, I think it will be really valuable. And there's certainly a lot of tools and functionality that I think will be very appropriate and useful in your day-to-day jobs with your conservation districts. So we'll go ahead and get started. As Holly mentioned, as we go through, please utilize the Q&A and the chat to type in your questions. And then at the end, we'll have some time to go through those. Okay, so before we actually get started talking about iMapInvasives, I want to just make sure we go over what we're talking about when we are referring to the term invasive species, just to make sure that we're all on the same page with that. And so invasive species are first and foremost non-native to an area. And then they also are known to cause harm in some way, and that can be harm to the environment, the economy, or to human and animal health. So those are the two primary things that you have to have in order to for species to be considered invasive. So before we delve into our main topic of IMAP, let's start out with the basic premise of why iMapInvasives exists in the first place. And that's to map invasive species, which are these non-native plants, animals, insects, and pathogens that are known to cause harm to the environment, economy, or human and animal health, as I just mentioned. Most invasive species aren't obvious or easily noticed. They often look like they belong in the settings that we find them. It's only when we look deeper into the issues that invasive species cause that we realize something needs to be done to limit their spread and the harmful impacts that they cause. In their natural range, plants, animals, insects, and pathogens are limited by factors that keep them in balance with the rest of nature. These factors can include pests, herbivores, or diseases. However, when introduced into an area where these limitations are absent, Some species can become invasive, and the biodiverse plant and wildlife communities that have evolved in a particular region over a long period of time can be destroyed. Some invasive species like purple loosestrife, which you can see here on this slide, look very beautiful to many of us with their striking purple blooms. However, beauty aside, these plants can cause serious ecological harm to the wetland habitats that they inhabit. When purple loosestrife invades an area, desirable native plants are outcompeted, and this invasive plant forms homogeneous stands. These monocultures will eventually reduce habitat for waterfowl, clog waterways, disrupt nutrient cycling, and transform this entire wetland habitat. So control and management efforts are for sure needed in areas where this and other invasive species are invading to ensure that the native plant and wildlife populations can rebound and thrive. So I also want to take a few moments and talk about the differences between the terms nuisance and invasive, because sometimes these can be used interchangeably, but they are very different. And I want to make sure that we understand the terminology correctly. So some species can be considered a nuisance by us as humans, but they're not actually invasive. Technically, they're not invasive. Again, thinking back to that definition of non-native and causing harm. So an example of a nuisance species would be something like poison ivy, where a lot of us that are sensitive to that plant, we come in contact with it, and we develop a pretty awful rash. I know I've been there, done that. It's not fun. But for those of you that may not know, poison ivy is actually a native plant to Pennsylvania and actually much of the Mid-Atlantic region. And so therefore, because this is a native plant, it can't be invasive. It's also actually a very beneficial plant to many of our species of wildlife. It's a food source for some insects, and it's also a favorite of many bird species that will utilize the berries as a food source and as a way to fatten up for their migration season. So I've actually come to really value and appreciate poison ivy, as weird as that may sound, but just understanding that it does have a lot of ecological value. And even if, myself, sensitive to this plant, I'm not a big fan of it, if it's in an area that I'm not going to frequent, it's best left there. Nature intended for this plant to be in our area, in our state. On the opposite side of that, then you have species that really are actually invasive, the ones that are non-native and causing harm. So an example, and we'll talk about many different examples of invasive species today, but an example is tree of heaven. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this species, again, because of its connection with spotted lanternfly, which is our big invasive species that a lot of us are talking about these days. But tree of heaven most certainly is an invasive plant. It produces these allelopathic compounds that will leach into the soil where it's growing and prevent the growth of other nearby plants, sometimes our desirable native species that we may want to be growing in that area. And it also causes damage to sewer lines and building foundations. So it's not something that you want on your property. So again, keeping in mind there's two differences, invasive and using them appropriately. So there are many, many invasive species, unfortunately, in Pennsylvania. In the iMapInvasives program in Pennsylvania, we currently track over 400 invasive species. Many of those are plants, but we also track animals and insects. The only type of species that we don't track in iMapInvasives are pathogens, but we do track all taxa other than that. So some examples of some common invasive species, I'm sure many of you have seen these already, include things like autumn olive, bush honeysuckle, and again, purple loosestrife, which was what we looked at a few slides ago. Then we have another category of species that we refer to as high priority. And high priority species in Pennsylvania are ones that are present in the states, but they're not yet widespread. They're, in about a third or less of our state's counties. So these are ones that, depending on the biology of the plant or, the animal or insect, we may be able to control effectively and possibly even eradicate some of these species if we catch them early and are able to really implement some of those treatment measures. So some examples of some high priority invasive species in Pennsylvania include Japanese angelica tree, black swallowwort, and creeping water primrose. Again, these are just a handful of examples. We certainly have many others as well. Then we have another category of invasive species called early detection. And early detection species are ones that are either not yet in Pennsylvania, but they're known from surrounding states. So they could certainly come in just based on their location to the states being nearby. And then also early detection can also refer to species that have recently or newly arrived in Pennsylvania, but we don't yet have a full understanding of their distribution in the state. So some examples of some early detection species for Pennsylvania, and all three of these species that you see on this slide are not yet in Pennsylvania as far as we know, include alligator weed, policeman's helmet, and Asian longhorn beetle. Okay, so that was sort of just a basic overview of invasive species and kind of the foundation for why we have iMapInvasives in the first place, again, to be finding and reporting these species so we have a good understanding of their distribution, and we can then prioritize what we want to do with these species, and that would most often be management of them. So iMapInvasives is this tool that empowers people to be able to have this information at your fingertips, this map-based tool to report and learn about these species distributions. So we'll go ahead and talk about kind of the overarching components of the IMAP program, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the database itself. So there are several components to iMapInvasives, and for those of you that are already familiar with the program, you may know about some of these, but you may not know about all of them. So first and foremost, I think most people that already know about IMAP know that it is this data collection tool. So it's this clearinghouse of information where people can contribute to it. We will also glean information from different data sources. We get information from museum specimens that have been archived. We'll get information from different state agencies. Different organizations will host bioblitzes that have experts confirming that information. So we are getting data from a variety of sources. That's just a sampling of some of the places where we get our information. So first and foremost, it is this tool that's used to collect the information. And then any information that goes into iMapInvasives is always quality checked, whether that's being checked first before it actually even goes into the database. Like, for example, if we're getting information from a museum, all of that data has been vetted and the IDs are accurate. So we don't need to quality check that ourselves. But if we have data that's coming in from an individual that's being submitted directly to the program, we do partner with over 50 experts across the state, as well as some of our own staff at the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy and the Natural Heritage Program that help to vet this information so that any data that's listed then as confirmed, you can trust that it's been looked at by an expert first. So in addition to this data collection tool and then the quality control that goes with that, the IMAP program is used to better understand and visually see these species distributions across the state. And that is going to be the presence information that the database can offer. And that is really, really valuable because if natural resource professionals are interested in doing management or they want to get a better understanding of where something is at, this is the tool to do that. You can go in and easily query the database for a particular species. You can look at a specific geographic area, say a whole county, or more specifically within a particular county, maybe a certain location. And you can get a very quick sense of what's been reported there just by looking at the data that we have in the program. In addition to presence information, we also record or allow people to record not detected or absence information. And for some people, that may be a little confusing. Like, why would you want to know that something isn't there? And there's actually a lot of value to that in different circumstances. So we will host various survey events throughout the year. And it's nice to be able to allow people to record absence or not detected information because we can see where people are searching across the state. So we can get a good sense of where that survey effort is occurring. It's also really valuable, especially for high priority and early detection species, to know that someone was at a location, searched for alligator weed, for example, didn't find it. And then maybe a few years down the road, someone did find it at that location. And so we can get a sense of how new a population might end up being just based on looking at some of the absence data that may have been reported earlier. So it sort of gives you a timeline of how new something is or how recently it came into an area. In addition to that not detected information, we also allow folks to record their treatment measures as well. So if you're doing some kind of chemical application, maybe it's a species that you can manually hand pull, or perhaps you're using a biocontrol to manage a species. All of that information can go into iMapInvasives, and you can use that for your own purposes within your organization to track where your efforts are occurring and when they're occurring and by whom. But also it's really valuable to share out with others if you're comfortable putting that information here in this public database, because I've had people contact me in the past and say, hey, I've got such and such species. I'm not really sure how best to management. What have other people, or how best to manage it? What have other people done? And so that's a perfect way to use the treatment data in IMAP to say, well, let's look up species, other people that have treated this particular species. What did they do? And how successful were they? And so you could actually get information, that way as well. So in addition to all this data collection and data viewing, another really cool part of IMAP that I don't know if a lot of people know about, but is very valuable, is this embedded email alert system. So essentially, when we get a report for a new species that gets later confirmed by an expert, that will trigger an email alert that anyone who's a registered user can sign up for and customize that alert to their liking. So if you're interested in, one or two specific species and you want to know when they get reported, in a particular place, you can set up an alert for that. If you're only interested in a specific geography, like your county, for example, you can set up an alert to say, notify me when any aquatic species gets reported in, Lycoming County, or whatever it might be that's specific to you and your day-to-day duties. So really helpful tool. It allows you to kind of stay up to date on that without having to log into the program all the time. That alert will get sent right to your email address. And then finally, the data in IMAP can be exported and used for your own purposes as you like. So you can do a filter for whatever data you're interested in, and then you can pull that out in the form of an Excel spreadsheet. Or if you're a GIS user, you can pull that out as a shapefile or a geodatabase as well. So there's a lot of things that you can do with this program. It's not just this data collection tool, it's a lot of other things as well. So in addition to the actual online database where you can record information, we do offer 2 mobile apps that you can take with you in the field to collect information. And the really great thing about both of these apps is as long as you have them already downloaded onto your device, you do not need an internet connection to use them. So you can literally be in the middle of nowhere where there is absolutely no cell service, and you can still use these apps to collect data. So they're a really great tool for those of you that work often in the field. So as I mentioned, we do have 2 apps. The first is our basic, I'm going to refer to it as our basic mobile app. And that is an app that will collect only presence and not detected information and point data only. Now that may seem sort of, what am I trying to say here? It might be somewhat limiting to some people, but most people, they don't need more than that. They only really want to record presence or not detected information, and they only want to just put a dot on the map. And so that basic mobile app will serve the purposes of many, many people that only really want to record that type of information. We also offer another app, Survey 123, which actually is an Esri product. We did not create Survey 123. But what we did do is we created a special digital form that can be included in Survey 123 that will be used specifically for collecting data that will then be transferred into the iMapInvasives program. The Survey 123 app is a bit more advanced than our basic mobile app. So that can collect not only presence and not detected information, but also treatment as well. And in addition to point data, you can also collect lines and polygons. So that's helpful if you want to record the size of an infestation. If it's a big area, you can draw a polygon around that. Or for creating a type of line record, if you're maybe hiking along a trail and you see, for example, a lot of stilt grass right along that trail, you can just draw a line right along that trail side, indicating the presence of that stilt grass that's there. So there is more information that you can learn about both of these mobile apps that's available online. And there's a link to that here in the PowerPoint. And as Holly mentioned earlier, everyone will be getting a copy of this PowerPoint. So you'll be able to access all these embedded links that I have here. So for those of you that are visual learners like myself, you'll appreciate that we do have some recorded demonstrations of how to use both of our mobile apps. And they are available on YouTube, so you can watch them at any time. So the titles of each of the videos are here, so you can just look those up in YouTube and watch them at your convenience if you would like. Again, there is these user guides that are available online, and I have them linked here in the PowerPoint presentation as well. Later on in my training, I will actually be doing a live demonstration of how to use the basic mobile app, so you will get a chance to see that today. So I always really like to talk about taking good pictures, the value in taking good pictures when you're recording your invasive species observations. And this is because, again, thinking back to the component that I mentioned earlier with Imap is the quality checking process. And we rely on the photographs that are included in a record in order to actually confirm this information for our experts to look at those pictures and say, yes, this is purple loosestrife. I can see these distinguishing characteristics in the photo. This can be confirmed. And so I want to go through a few examples to give you a sense of what I'm talking about there. So the picture on the left, again, this is an image of purple loosestrife, and we can see that this plant is, we're taking a picture that's very up close, clear and crisp. We can see the distinguishing characteristics of this plant that we need in order to make a confirmation. The middle photo, this is a photo of mile-a-minute vine. We can still probably make a confirmation for this species based on this photograph, but it's not ideal because you can see when someone was taking this image, their camera wasn't focusing on the mile-a-minute vine. It was focusing on the vegetation in the background. So it's really important to make sure that you slow down, make sure you're looking at what your camera is seeing, essentially, and make sure that it's honing in on that target that you want to make sure you include in your photograph and it's coming through clear and crisp. The other thing that I laugh because this happens all the time is unfortunately people will see something and they might be more 10 or 15 feet away from it and take a picture at that distance. And for our purposes, there's more often than not, there's no way we can make a confirmation of a plant when you're standing that far away from it, or any other species really for that matter. So it's very important that you're getting up close and personal with the thing that you're looking at. Now, there are a few exceptions to that rule. Things like giant hogweed, I do not recommend getting anywhere near something like that, just based on the awful skin rashes that it can cause for people, and sometimes worse. So, use your best judgment for species that you want to stay far away from for health reasons. But everything else, make sure that you're like within arm's reach of that plant. That's how close we need you to be to get those good distinguishing characteristics included in your photograph. So here's some examples of really great photos that I really appreciate when people take pictures like this, because it's really easy then to do the quality check process that we need to do. So these are all photos of Tree of Heaven. So starting at the left, we can see that these are the leaflets of Tree of Heaven. We can see a very special distinguishing characteristic of Tree of Heaven, which if you look at the base of each of those leaflets, there's a little notch on the leaflet. And that is something that's very unique to Tree of Heaven that we look for when we identify this species. If you would flip those leaflets over and look at them on the underside, you'll notice there's these little glands also near the base of those leaflets. And those glands will emit a very not pleasant odor. And that's one of the reasons why people refer to tree of heaven as being a stinky tree. It smells like burnt peanut butter or well-worn gym socks or something like that. I've heard multiple descriptions. But anyway, so if you're honing in on taking a picture of those glands, that's another thing that's going to help us to make a confirmation of your record. There's other parts of tree of heaven too that are very specific and we would consider distinguishing characteristics. And so this photo on the right is showing a leaf scar, and that's going to be a certain shape and size that we're looking at, but also the bark as well of tree of heaven. It's said to resemble the skin of a cantaloupe. And so we can see both of those things here in this image. Again, that's going to be something that allows us to make a confirmation. All of these pictures are taken very up close to that plant. They're all clear and crisp. So excellent. These are the types of pictures that we really need people to be taking when they're recording data in the program. And I will mention too, there was recently a story included in our most recent edition of our newsletter that we send out called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly: Why Photography Matters When Documenting Invasive Species. And that article essentially goes over in detail everything that I just mentioned here, talking about the importance of taking good pictures when you're making observation records in the program in IMAP. Okay, so now we're going to delve into the nitty-gritty of the database so you can get a better feel for the tools and the functionality that it offers. So first and foremost, to access the database, you'll need to go to our program's website, which is PAIMapInvasives.org. And in the top header of the web page, you'll see a register and a login button. And if you click on either one of them, depending on if you need to register for an account for the first time, or if you already have one and you want to log in, it will take you to this page where you see a sign up form. So you can either go ahead and sign up if you're already, or if you need to register for an account, or you can go ahead and enter in your login credentials if you already have them. So it is free to get an account. You don't need to pay to do so. That's a free service that we offer. Okay, so once you do log into the platform, this is what you will see. You'll see this big map and a bunch of tools scattered across the screen. And because the program is map-based, we start out with this map. And essentially, we don't really see a lot right now. There's not a lot going on. We're at the country level, Zoom level. We're not really getting a lot of information at this point. But all of these different tools that you see on the sides and the top will essentially be driving what you see on the map. So you need to go in and make different selections in order to get the information to show up on the map that you're most interested in. So I'm going to go through all those different tools and show you what everything does. So starting on the far left, you'll notice that there's a little green leaf and a little circle with some horizontal lines in it. That is our main menu. If you click on that menu, you'll see a drop-down populate with different things that you can click on. So the first thing is our jurisdiction species list. This is the list of species that we currently track in Pennsylvania. As I mentioned, we do track over 400 species currently, so there is a lot. So you can go in and access that jurisdiction species list at any time to get a better feel for the species that we track, or if you're curious if we do track a certain species, you can type that into the search species toolbar there and see if the species you're interested in will pop up. Then we have our network species list. That list is talking about all the species that are tracked in all of the states and provinces that currently participate in the IMAP Invasives program. So it's not just Pennsylvania. We do have several other states, including New York, Maine, Arizona, Oregon, and several Canadian provinces that also participate with IMAP Invasives as well. So this is that big list that serves all of these different programs. Then we have our projects tab. So this is essentially, projects are a way to create a place to gather information that you want to have grouped together to then be able to easily query for it later on. So that could be almost anything. For example, I mentioned BioBlitzes before. You could create a project that would be specific to a BioBlitz that you may be hosting with your organization. And that way you can keep all that information together and you can easily query for it later on. We have over 100 projects in here right now, so you can see a lot of people are using this and using it in various ways. Again, just as that way to kind of keep their own data together and easily look for it on the map later on. Then we have our organizations section. So this is where you can go in when you're setting up your profile in Imap and affiliate your account with your organization that you're with. And so for folks on our webinar training today, you're going to go in and look for your specific county conservation district and click on that, and then you can affiliate your account with your profile. So the way you would do that, I'm here as an example at the Butler County Conservation District, and then up over in the right section, you'll see a hyperlink where it says request to join organization. You can click on that, and then that will send me a request where I will approve that, and then that organization will be affiliated with your account. We do recommend that everyone does this when you set up an account, so we have a good idea of your affiliated organization and who you're coming from or who you're working with and your background when it comes to submitting this data. So just as another example, if you don't work for a specific conservation district, but for example, if you work for PACD, we have that organization in here as well, that you would just do the same process where you click on request to join that organization, and then that will show up in your user profile. Then you can actually access your own account from the main menu as well. So if you ever want to go in and edit your accounts, add information, or modify any of the projects or organizations that you're affiliated with, this is where you can go ahead and do that. And I mentioned earlier the ability to set up email alerts. So this is where you would access the ability to set up a new email alert. There's lots of ways you can customize an alert based on species, geography. Yeah, I would definitely encourage folks to get in there and kind of play with it, because there's a lot of different options that will allow it to be most specific to you, that would, and again, be the most value to you as far as what you're being notified about. So for sure, get in there and set up an alert if you're interested in doing that. You can set up more than one alert, so you can have 10, depending on what you're interested in learning about. And you can deactivate an alert if you don't want to receive that alert anymore. You can just deactivate it for the time and then reactivate it later if you're interested in doing that. So just as an example of some of the capabilities that the email alerts offer, say, for example, you're interested in a specific geographic location, but it's hard to clarify that on the map. And so what you can do is pick a point on the map and then draw a certain radius around that point, and anything inside that radius you will be notified about. And so here's just an example of a school in the Philadelphia area where maybe a teacher wanted to be notified of what was being found nearby their school. And here's some examples of the species that are found in that region. So again, all that information would be sent to you in an email alert should you choose to set something like that up. Okay, so coming back out to the default map view, or to the map view again, the little icon that's over on the right hand, or the left-hand side, that looks like a little house, that is your, if you click on that, that will take you back out to this, zoomed out view of the map. If you've been moving around and zooming in on the map, clicking on that house will take you back out to this default view again. Then we have a little tool, it looks like little crosshairs. If you click on that, that will find your current location where you are at right now. If you are mapping something and you want to, go right to that location, clicking on those crosshairs will allow you to do that. Then we also have a little search bar that if you want to go to a particular location, you can type in an address, a place name, or GPS coordinates, and it will zoom directly to that area on the map for you. So as an example, say you're interested in looking at a game land, if you're maybe working with the Game Commission on something. So you could type in state game lands number 314, and that will take you right to that game land in Erie County. So that's just an example of how that tool would work. Okay, so now we're going to migrate over to the top of the screen. And the first button that you'll see here is probably the most used button. in the database, that is our create record button. That is where you can go in and add a presence, a not detected, or a treatment record here within the database itself. The multi-record searched area tool is essentially the ability to record multiple of any of those data types at the same time. So it sort of speeds up the data entry process. But if you want to add data and you're here in the online database, you're going to want to go ahead and click on that create record. That will then send you through a series of prompts to enter the data that you need to enter for your citing of a species. And then that will submit directly to the database once you finish that process. It's a very quick process, probably only takes about a minute to do. So I would certainly encourage folks after today's training that to go ahead and use that tool, get familiar with it, and add some data for some actual invasive species. Make sure that you're not just going in here and playing with the database. This is an actual database where we're recording, real information. And sometimes people get a little confused and they thought, oh, I just did this as a test. So make sure that you're actually recording real information and not, test information. Just want to clarify that. So the next button is called Go to Record. And this is probably something that most people don't use. Myself as an administrator, I use this fairly often though. But if you know the identification number that is affiliated with a particular record, you can type in that record number and it will take you right to that specific record on the map. Like I said, most people probably won't need to use that tool, but it is there in case you would like to use it. What most of you probably will use is this next tool. This is called Filter Records. This is the main tool that will drive the map to the information that you are interested in viewing, whether that's for a particular species. Maybe you're only interested in data that you have looked at. Maybe you're only interested in data that was recently found. So we have in the section where it says records after and records before, you can type in a particular date range of when something was found. You can combine any of these fields and really make a larger type of data filter. So you're not only limited to one thing, you can do multiple things as well. And you'll notice at the top section of this little pop-up window right underneath the green bar where it says filter records, we're on the general tab right now, but there's other tabs here as well. Presence, treatment, not detected, record IDs, geography, and metadata. These are all things that you can help to build a query to get at the data that you're most interested in. So you're not only limited to just what you see here on the screen, there is other ways to filter your data as well. So again, this is going to be the tool that most people will use in order to filter the map for the data that you want to see. So just as an example, or a few examples here to show you, this is a map that's showing the presence information for autumn olive found in Pennsylvania. And you can see there on the left side, I have under the species name section, I've filtered just for autumn olive data. And in the jurisdiction area, I've searched just under Pennsylvania. You are not limited to only looking at one species at a time, I believe. I think you can look at multiple if you want. But then here on the map, you can see that all that data now populates based on the filter that you created. When we're at this statewide view, the data is a little limited in how it will draw. So it's not going to give you super specific location information at this zoom level. But if you would zoom in closer on the map, and I believe there'll be some screenshots coming up a little bit later that I can show you this, you'll see those exact point locations for where that species was reported. But at that statewide level, it's just kind of giving you a general area of where it's been found. Here's another example of a data filter that was created. So this is looking just at water chestnut data. So we can see on the map where that species has been found already. Again, giving us a sense of that species distributions across the state. I do have some arrows pointing to the layers on off section of the map. And it's really important that when you're running a species query, the map will automatically turn on all of our data that has been confirmed. Again, that's that data that's been quality checked by an expert. The layer that does not automatically turn on, but make sure that you are going in and turning that on, is our approximate data. And approximate data is also expert confirmed. The only difference is approximate data doesn't always have specific GPS coordinates. And that's based on either how something was mapped or the data source that we got it from. So I'll give you some examples of what I mean by that. So depending on the data source, as I mentioned, we do get information from museum specimens. And so sometimes, depending on how long ago a record was created, the GPS coordinates may not have been, included in that record. Maybe we only know that it was from a certain county. And so we have to map something as approximate when we don't have the specific coordinates for it for that reason. Sometimes we know that, say an aquatic species like hydrilla, for example, was found in a particular water body, but we don't know where in that water body that species was found. So we're going to mark that species as approximate because we know it's somewhere in that water body. We just don't know where. And then in other cases, sometimes people will map something while they're in the field, and their device may map it in the middle of a roadway when I'm pretty confident, that species wasn't found in the middle of a road. And so we will mark that species, that data record, as approximate just because we know that the map location isn't quite right. Probably that species was supposed to be mapped 20 feet, to the right off of the road in, the little woods area or something that might be nearby. So there's a lot of reasons why something might be marked as approximate, but it's still really valuable information to have a good sense of where these species are being found across the state. So going across the top here, so we do have another tool that's called identify/measure. And this tool is a really neat way to essentially get a good grasp of what is being found on the map and seeing all that information in a table view. So I'm going to go through and show you what that looks like here in a moment. So that's what the area button will do. If you see down here at the bottom of the screen, there's a little pop-up that says area and distance. The distance, if you would click on that, is just a neat way to get a good sense of how far apart something is from something else. So you can click on distance and you can click on the map to locations and you'll be able to see how far apart they are. You can actually choose the distance yourself, whether that's feet, meters, miles, kilometers, whatever that might be. So using the Identify Measure tool to get a good sense of what we're looking at here on the map. So we can see here there's a lot of different points. We have confirmed and approximate data turned on for various species, but what the heck are we looking at? When were these data points observed and who observed them and what species are we looking at? So when we click on the area portion of this Identify Measure button, we can then draw a polygon around the data that we are most interested in looking at. So we can see I've drawn a polygon here on the map, and then a little button will pop up at the bottom that says, see what's here. So if I click that button, a table will pop up at the bottom of the screen, and that's going to allow me to scroll through and see all the data that's within that polygon that I've drawn. So I can see the species name, I can see the observation date, I can know how recent something was found, I can see the observer's name, I can see their affiliated organization. And from this table, I can actually access any of these records and all the details that are associated with it. There's two tabs on this table at the bottom. We're on the confirmed tab, and then there's also a tab for the approximate data. And so you can bounce back and forth between that information because we can see that both of those data types are turned on in this screenshot. So there are tools that will allow you to get a good grasp of what you're looking at on the map without you having to click on every single point individually, which would take a long time to do. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you can use the database to look at the information that you're interested in. You can also pull it out and incorporate it into a GIS if you're a map savvy person, or if you're creating reports and you want to include an Excel spreadsheet of different species. You can do that with our export report option, and it will give you the options of what kind of data you want to export, whether that's a spreadsheet or something that's map related. And on this tab, there's also a report option. You can bounce back and forth between either export or report. And the reports give you the ability to kind of look at the data in a different way, specifically here in the database. And there's 4 different reports that you can run. And there's more details about each of those reports in the database. I would recommend and encourage you to check out more details about each of them here. But I'm going to run through just an example here in the next few slides of what one of these reports can do. So the species list by geography, I'm going to show you what that does. So here I can say I'm interested in a specific geography, and I'm going to choose a county as that specific geography. You can choose other geography types as well. You're not limited just to a county. But say, for example, you want to know all the species that have been reported in Venango County. This report will allow you to do that directly in the program. You can also choose a different type of geography. This is based on our conservation lands. And so here we can see I've selected a particular state game lands, number 39, in this particular part of the state. So using, again, this report option, I can get a full list of all the invasive species that have been found in state game lands 39 by using this species list by geography report. You can also go and look at a particular area. Here I'm looking at a municipality, and I've drawn a radius outside that municipality. So I want to know what's in a 5-mile buffer of this particular location, the borough of Polk in Pennsylvania. And so you can do that for any of these other geographies. You could build a radius around a county, a state game land, a state forest, whatever you want that's, again, specific to your particular needs. Then that will make this report, which looks like this. This is a report that will be generated directly in iMapInvasives, and it will list all the species that have been found in the geography that you have selected. You'll want to make sure, again, as I mentioned earlier, that you have not only your confirmed data turned on when you're doing these reports, but you also have that approximate data turned on as well. And you can see the different columns where we have the scientific and common names listed, and then also the confirmed counts of the confirmed records and the approximate records, and then the total number of species for all of those, for all of that data. This information can be printed. If you create a PDF of this report, you can then save that to your computer and print it directly, and then use that for whatever you would like to use it for. Okay, so continuing on through the tools here, on the right-hand side, there is the ability to change your base map. So depending on the type of data that you're looking at, it might look better on a particular background than it would on something else. So we do offer a variety of base maps that you can use for your purposes. Here's just a sampling of some of them. We also have this really cool tool called Add Layer from URL. And it's essentially a way to bring in an external web map service that would be publicly available for you to utilize, and bring that in and look at information in iMapInvasives alongside this external web map service. Again, we offer some web maps, or I'm sorry, some mapping layers in IMAP already, but this is another way to bring in maybe something more custom that we wouldn't offer that you can then put in yourself. So as an example, here's a layer for all the state game lands in Pennsylvania. We do not offer this layer in IMAP already. You can pull that in and bring that into IMAP yourself. There is a lot of public map layers that are available out there. So you can just choose to bring in whatever you want and just use and add that information in from this Add Layer from URL tool. Then we have a tool that's called Add Distribution Layer. This is going to allow you to look at the data that you filtered using that Filter Records tool, and look at the information via a custom geography. And I'm going to show you some screenshots here of what I mean by that here in a moment. But some of those custom geographies can include county, conservation lands, municipalities, and others. So here's an example of how you could look at county level data. You're not only restricted at looking at just the points, lines, and polygons. You can look at information by filtering for a species. So here I filtered for tree of heaven, and I've used that Add Distribution Layer to say, I only want to look at this data and know what counties have been impacted. So here's a map showing that information just for tree of heaven, again, based on the confirmed and approximate data that we have in the system. Here's some other examples of how you could use that Add Distribution Layer tool. So this is also looking at tree of heaven data. But now I'm only looking at our conservation lands mapping layer. So here's all the conservation lands that have been impacted and where Tree of Heaven has been found. There's also a map there we can see the municipalities that have been impacted by Tree of Heaven as well. Again, this is based on the embedded map layers that we already have included in iMapInvasives. Then we have this section, we talked about this a little bit already, called layers on off. This is where you can turn on those different data types. So again, the confirmed is that expert vetted information. Unconfirmed data is information that's been submitted to the database and it's not yet been looked at or reviewed by an expert. It's helpful though, if you want to be able to see your data that you recently submitted, you can turn that unconfirmed data layer on and that information will populate. Then we also have our approximate information, the not detected or the absence, and then treatment. So you're going to want to make sure to turn on any of those layers that are applicable to you when you're creating a species filter using the filter records option. So for example, here we've done a filter just for autumn olive, and we're turning on we're turning on our confirmed and our approximate information, and that's going to show up here on the map. So again, using those layers as you see fit for whatever purposes you have. We recently also included a layer that is specific to iNaturalist data. This is pulling data directly from the iNaturalist database for the previous 5 years worth of information. So when you're creating a filter for a certain species, you can choose to also turn on data from iNaturalist and see that side by side with iMapInvasives data. Finally, as I mentioned, we do have a lot of map layers already incorporated into the database. And this is where you'll be able to turn those on and off, again, using them for however you want to see that information. So I'm going to run through some slides here of some of the mapping layers that we offer. So here's our states and provinces layer. Here's our counties layer, water bodies, conservation lands. These are our CWMAs, or gosh, why am I blanking on this? These are our weed management areas, cooperative weed management areas across the state. They're termed regional management partnerships, but they're essentially our CWMAs. This is our hydro basins layer and our municipalities layer. So we offer all these things. You can turn that on and off in conjunction with looking at your data to help you to better understand where some of these species are being found. Finally, we do have a legend that will show you all the different things you're looking at as you're turning things on and off. There's a lot of different symbology that's coming up. That legend will allow you to understand what that symbology is representing. Okay, so I was going to do a demo of our app, but it looks like we're running a little short on time. So I'm going to skip that for now. If we have time at the end and some folks don't mind staying on a little bit longer, I'm happy to do that, but I don't want to run over too much on time. So I'm going to skip this part for now. As I mentioned earlier, we do have some recorded videos already posted on YouTube that folks can learn how to use these apps just by watching those videos. So those resources are available if we don't get to the live demo today. So I apologize if I'm going a little over time, but we can always do that later if folks want to stay on a little bit longer. So I do just want to mention, we've talked about a lot today. Lot to digest and think through as far as the functionality that is included in IMAP. But here's some ways that you can now take the information that you've learned about today as far as tracking invasive species and reporting your finds. So first and foremost, go ahead and start using some of this information that you've learned about today while it's still fresh in your mind. Maybe today or later this week, log into the database, create an account, and look at some of the data that's already been reported in your local area or your region. Use that filter records tool, turn that on, and just see what species have been reported. You can draw a radius around an area and run a report, whatever you want to do. But go ahead and use some of those tools to get a good sense of what species have already been reported in the areas where you either live or work in. I would also encourage you to go ahead and set up at least one email alert. Even if it's just something that you just want to try out, you can deactivate it later if you want to, but just get familiar with this tool and what it can offer to you as far as staying up to date on either a particular species or a particular area like a whole county or a specific location that you may be interested in. So go ahead and just test that out and set one up. Also, I think most people on today's call do some type of field work. And so it's going to be really important to make sure that if you're interested in tracking invasive species with IMAP, that you have at least one of our mobile apps already downloaded onto a device that you commonly use out in the field. So go ahead, download one or both of our mobile apps, and then go ahead and just create a record. You're not going to be hard pressed probably to find some invasive species here at the height of our growing season, now that we're in summertime. So create that record using one of the apps and then submit that to the database and just get familiar with that process and what that feels like. Again, we do have user guides that are available that will provide all the details you need to know about these apps, and those are available online. I've linked to them here on this PowerPoint slide as well. Then there are a lot of species to get familiar with. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we do track over 400 species currently, which is a lot. So there is a lot of great information that's out there that you can use to get more familiar with some of these species, some really good field guides. We do offer resources on our Pennsylvania iMapInvasives program website, so you can check out our gallery of invaders on our website. There's also some field guides that are available digitally online, and they include the Plant Invaders of Mid-Atlantic Natural Areas and also Pennsylvania's Field Guide to Aquatic Invasive Species. So the Plant Invaders of Mid-Atlantic Natural Areas focuses mostly on terrestrial species, and the Pennsylvania's Field Guide to Aquatics focuses mostly on our water-based invasive species. And then DCNR also offers some really fantastic fact sheets. I believe it's right around 100 or slightly over 100 fact sheets. Most of those are terrestrial-based species, and those are also available online. So here's an example of one of the fact sheets from DCNR for showing off the information for European black alder. So all these are really great resources. I would definitely recommend checking those out. And then I have to put in a plug for a current event that's actually going on right now. That would be great if anyone who's interested could join up and be part of this event. So we have a survey that's happening across the state right now. So everyone who's on today's call can participate in this, where we're asking folks to look for spotted lanternfly and tree of heaven. This event started here this month in June. It's going to last till November. So it's going from summer to right at the end of fall. And we're asking people again to be looking for these two species, but especially we really want people to be looking in these early detection areas of the state where spotted lanternfly has not yet been found. So much of Northwest, Southwest, and North Central, there are locations in those regions where spotted lanternfly has not yet been found. And it's really critical that we hopefully get a step up on this species and we can find it early and hopefully get it out of these areas before it starts to spread and really take over some of these areas. But again, as I mentioned, this survey is for the whole state, so you can participate no matter where you are. We did do a training on this event. That training was recorded. It's also available online on YouTube. You can watch that training. And then we have a special map set up using ArcGIS where you can claim a survey location that you want to survey in, or you can claim multiple locations. So all that information is online. If you'd like to check that out and participate, you can do that today after today's call. You can go ahead and get started right away. It'd be great to get some more folks involved. Finally, as I'm wrapping up here, I wanted to provide kind of even more specific information for folks that may just be starting out with getting to know invasive species. And certainly we've gone over a lot here, and we know that there's a lot of species out there to be looking for. So what I did is I put together some lists for each of the PACD regions. And there's a list of 10 species for each region that you can do your homework on if you choose to, and just get more familiar with some of these species. It's a place to start because these are species that are found in your region that you likely maybe will stumble upon, and you can help to report these finds to IMAP as you may find them. So starting in the Northwest, here's a list of species to be looking for. Again, as I mentioned earlier with spotted lanternfly, much of the Northwest is an early detection area for this species for spotted lanternfly. And so it's really critical that we are looking for this species early and hopefully finding it early so we can get management on the ground as soon as possible and eradicate that species before it has the chance to spread. These lists, as I'm going through these slides here, you'll be able to look at later on. So don't feel like you have to memorize everything in the few seconds that I'll have the slide up. So I just want to mention that too for your reference. Here's a list of species that you could be looking for in the Southwest. This also includes spotted lanternfly. I should also mention the species in green are mostly terrestrial based, so you're going to find these on land. And the species in the blue box are water based, so these are our aquatic species that you can be looking for. Here's a species list for the North Central region. Again, these are all species that you'll be finding in your area. They've already been reported there. Some of these are more common than others. Some of these might be more of a high priority species that are not as common as some others are. Here's the list for the South Central region. The list for the Northeast region. And finally, the list for the Southeast region. Okay, so to wrap up, this is my second to last slide here. I think most people would probably agree at this point, just based on everything we've talked about so far, that there are many practical applications for using iMapInvasives if you're a natural resource professional or a land manager in Pennsylvania. We do have a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds and groups that are already utilizing the program. So we have a lot of folks from state agencies, nonprofit organizations, and a variety of community scientists, people who are not necessarily affiliated with a particular group. They just have an interest in this program and the work that it's doing and contributing to that information as well. And so, if you're part of a larger group here, with most folks are affiliated with PACD, if you're maybe part of another group like a cooperative weed management area, a CWMA, storing this type of information into one central place is really valuable for large groups of people, because when you're working together, you want to make sure that you're all looking at the same information, that you're contributing data to the same area, and everyone knows where to go to access that information. And because IMAP is publicly available, there is no restrictions on who can go in and see that information. So it's a great tool to be able to collaborate with if you're part of a group. So that is all I have. Molly or Holly, please go ahead and we can start looking at some questions if folks have any questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Amy. I think you did a wonderful job explaining the program. Thank you for taking the time today to teach us, the overview of iMapInvasives and how we can use it in our counties. So yeah, we'll go ahead and why don't we do the Q&A for a couple minutes. If anyone thinks of anything, please put it in the chat. And then afterwards, we can run through a demo. Anyone who has to jump off for something else, the demo will be on the recording, which will be shared with everyone. So no worries if you don't have time to sit through the demo afterwards. We will definitely get that out there for everyone. So Amy, the first question that we have is, why are invasive plant species sold everywhere? How can we stop the spread of invasives when they are literally sold at Walmart and on Amazon? Animals are also sold as pets at Petco, etc.
That is a wonderful question. And I think I could take all day trying to answer it probably. But I think that there's probably multiple ways to look at the issue of all these species that are technically considered invasive that are still being sold. So there is a lot of just lack of education and knowledge out there by many people in the industry and many people in the public who just aren't aware that something is problematic. And there is a definite need to educate folks on this topic, because the more people know about the issue, the more people care about it, and the more people then take action, hopefully positive action, to change the way they do things, essentially. But there is a lot of work that's happening currently with the Pennsylvania Controlled Plant and Noxious Weed Committee, where they are looking at different plant species specifically that are considered invasive and noxious as well, and adding them to that list through careful consideration. And anything that then is on the noxious weed list in our state is prohibited from being sold. So recently, I think most people probably heard about Japanese barberry and Callery pear being added to the noxious weed list. Each of those has a 2-year grace period assigned to it. So after a certain point, they will technically not be able to be sold. The 2-year grace period was put into place to allow nursery growers and others to be able to sell out their stock and not have a hard financial hit by having those 2 species listed. But yeah, I mean, I guess in general, I would just sum up the answer to that question to just say that there is a lack of knowledge out there. And also, I think people just have been so used to being able to purchase certain things. An example of this, and I don't know if it'll ever get listed on the noxious weed list or not, but it is technically invasive, is actually Japanese maple. And that might come as a surprise to some people, but that is known to outcompete some of our native species when it escapes into natural areas. And I have a hard time thinking that that will ever, not be allowed to be sold, considering how popular it is. But technically, it is invasive. And so it's just kind of thinking through, what really is causing harm, what's going to be the best thing for our environment, and educating people mostly on the value and importance of native species. It's important to know about the harm that these invasives cause, but it's also really important to then turn around and say, but then there's these wonderful native species that have evolved in our region. They're the ones that are going to be most beneficial to our wildlife, our insect populations, and to the functioning of our healthy ecosystems. So yeah, education, education, education.
Thank you, Amy. And Hope asks, are people able to submit invasives and use the site without being part of an organization?
Yes, you do not have to be part of an organization in order to use IMAP. What we have set up actually is quote unquote an organization that's called Pennsylvania Community Scientists. And that's sort of the catch-all for everyone else who is not affiliated with PACD or whatever organization. They're just interested in being able to contribute to this. So folks can still affiliate an organization with their profile as being a community scientist, even if they're not working for a particular group or agency.
Okay, perfect. And this one kind of goes along with that as well. From Elena, can people sign up through the Conservation District if they don't work there for a more localized countywide experience, or is that only for employees of conservation districts?
So generally, we ask people to only affiliate with a particular agency or group if they are employed or if they volunteer, if they're like an official volunteer with that group. If they're not one of those, if they're not an employee or a volunteer, then we would suggest listing the affiliated organization as being a community scientist in that case.
Okay, and then also from Elena, if people accidentally map native species, is there a map layer or in the reports, can that information be shown as well? Or is it solely just invasive species that are shown in the map layers and the reports?
Yeah, so we only track invasive species. So we do not show any data for natives at all. So if something came through, which this happens sometimes, someone will misidentify a species as being invasive, but it's actually a native species. We will catch that in our quality check process, and we will remove that record from our database, because again, we're only tracking invasive species. That just makes me think of something that I do want to mention. That can sometimes make people think, well, I don't know, I'm not like an expert in identification of all these different species, so I don't feel qualified to be able to contribute data because I'm not sure what something is. I always tell people, if that's how you feel, take your best guess. Look through some field guides, look at what you're looking at and say, I think this is multiflora rose, for example. Maybe it's a native rose. It could be. But go ahead and mark it as multiflora rose, submit it to the database, we'll quality check it, If it's not correct, we'll fix it or we will remove it from the database. But more often than not, it's more valuable to just go ahead and contribute that information because maybe you're right. Maybe it really is multiflora rose, and it's helpful to know where that species is if it hasn't been reported in a particular county before. And that's a first in county record that we got for that species. So don't feel like you have to be an expert, especially starting out. And I will just say, I am not an expert. I did not go to school for biology or botany or any of that. I was an agriculture major. And so I do not have expertise in this, but I learn as I go. And as you get more practice and you see these species more and you educate yourself more and get some resources under your belt, you get more familiar with these species. So don't be discouraged if you don't know some of this stuff already. Just go ahead and try your best, and it'll get caught in the quality check process if it needs to.
That's great. I think identification is a really great segue into this next question. Amy, are there any good sites or resources for learning more about invasives and natives, especially how to identify them?
Yes. So I'm just going to backtrack on my slideshow here to this page right here. So yes, there are a variety of resources that are out there that I would certainly recommend. And I very often use myself as far as learning more about species identification. So we do have field guides that are available online. So you don't need the physical one. You can actually just find these right online. The Plant Invaders of Mid-Atlantic Natural Areas is focusing mostly on terrestrial species. The Pennsylvania's Field Guide to Aquatic Invasive Species is mostly these water-based species. And then, as I mentioned, also DCNR has a variety of fact sheets that are also available online for about right around 100 species that they've created these fact sheets for. And they have really great pictures in them. They also have, I think most of these field guides and fact sheets have information on lookalike species, which is a really, really good thing to know about because there are a lot of species that look similar out there. And so it's important to know, well, I'm looking for black alder, for example, but this and this and this also look similar to black alder. So it's important to know about those as well. Again, you don't have to become an expert overnight. Just take your time, pace yourself, and learn some of these species one at a time. And again, I would encourage folks to use these lists that I put together to start out small. Take your region and just get to know some of these species on your list. And then kind of branch out from there. But start out small. That's usually the best way to go.
Thanks, Amy. And Brooke asks, any recommendations for email alerts to sign up for in Armstrong County? And she did leave her email in case there's a more detailed answer that we can possibly send her afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the email alerts, I can't really suggest a type of email alert because it's going to be based on what is important to you. So, if you're concerned about a whole county, like if your region that you work in is a whole county, which I think is pretty applicable to our audience today, you might want to, create an email alert that's specific to all of Armstrong County, for example. Maybe you're working on a few particular sites in the county that you want to be tapped into what's happening at those certain locations. So you can use that radius from point that I showed earlier, where you choose a point on the map and then build out your radius so that you're notified of anything that is within that area that you specify. So again, just knowing that the email alerts, they offer a lot of capabilities, and it's just based on what is most important to you is going to be what, essentially how you customize your alert. So if people have more questions about the alerts, I'm happy to talk more about that. Folks can feel free to reach out to me.
Okay, great. And from Larissa, we have, if we have new emails, do we need a new account or can we just update it?
Yeah, great question. So I would definitely encourage folks to reach out to me and I will update your account for you with your new email address. We try not to create new accounts because then it sort of skews the amount of the numbers of data that we have for the number of registered users. So if someone creates 2 accounts, but it's the same person, that kind of gives an inflated look at how many people are registered with the program. So if you know that your email is going to change, or if it already has, just reach out to me and I'll go ahead and update that for you.
Perfect. And Carl asks, do invasive plants provide a benefit to bees? I ask because some of the honey produced from the flowers of invasive species is amazing. Does the eradication of invasive species by way of herbicide have a negative impact on bees? And then he also said, thank you for an extremely informative, interesting, and well-crafted presentation, Amy.
Thank you. Okay, so I think there was two questions in there. I'm going to address the first one, where the question was, the value of invasive species for honey production by bees. Japanese knotweed is a good example that I've heard many people, talk about that being used as a source for the flowers that bees will then use for honey production. So this is a somewhat controversial topic, so I don't want to get caught in the middle of that. And this, I guess, is just my personal view of it. It's not necessarily an organization view of it, not representing WPC or the Heritage Program per se, but I would just look at it from the viewpoint that there are so many fantastic native species out there that are not causing ecological harm and that are useful to bees for honey production. And so even though, again, using the knotweed as an example, even though we know that bees will use knotweed to produce honey from, that species is causing ecological harm. That's been proven. We know that it should not be in our ecosystem for many reasons. So even though it's being used by the bees, if you got rid of the knotweed and replaced it with a valuable native species or a variety of native species, the bees still have the thing they need to create the honey. And then there's not any harm being caused to the environment at the same time. So for me, I try to balance it and say, yes, I recognize that there is a benefit if you're looking at it from the honey production side, but there's harm being caused at the same time. But if you're using native species, it's a win-win in both instances. The other question I believe that was asked was in regards to chemical usage. That I don't feel comfortable speaking to because that's not my wheelhouse. And I know that also is somewhat controversial. So I'm just stepping up and saying I don't have the expertise to address that particular question. So unfortunately, I will not be able to provide an answer on the chemical usage. But there is information out there online. I would suggest reaching out to Penn State Extension. They have some really great resources and some folks that probably would be better able to answer that question than I would. So I'm not stepping away from it because I don't want to. I just don't have the expertise to answer that question.
All right, thank you so much, Amy, and thank you to everyone who asked questions. I don't see any more at this time. So Amy, why don't we go ahead and just do like a brief, you wanted to do a demo of the app.
Yes, yep, yeah. So for anyone that wants to stay on, feel free to do so. I apologize, I went a little bit over, so we can go ahead and do this. Holly, can you confirm that you can see the app on my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so yes, this is our basic mobile app. As I mentioned earlier, there are two apps. This is our basic one. There's also the Survey 123 app. We do have recorded videos available on YouTube for both. So you can take time after today's training and watch those YouTube videos at any time, and it will walk through the process for how to use both. But I'll go ahead and do a demo here for how to use our basic mobile app. So I'm here on my phone. I've already got the app downloaded onto my phone. All you have to do is go wherever you get your apps. So depending on what phone you have, you go to the Apple App Store or the Android Google Play Store. So I've got an Android device, so I've got the app downloaded onto my phone. And you can see when you open up the app for the first time, you'll have like this little SketchUp of information where it's showing you the different parts of the app and just getting you a little bit more familiar with it. So if you tap on your phone, that information will disappear. So that's just something to kind of get you acclimated with the app when you first open it up. So when you first open the app, before you actually start creating data, before you start adding observations, you want to do something first, and that is going to be setting up your preferences. So if you tap on the menu in the upper left corner and choose preferences, that's going to open up a section that you need to fill in first that will then help to populate information when you create your actual observation data. If this is the first time that you're using the app, all of this information will be blank. Mine's already filled in because I already have all this information set up. But it's going to go through things. So we'll go through one by one what you need to fill in. It's going to ask you for your jurisdiction. And so you're going to want to choose Pennsylvania. Next, it's going to ask you for your iMapInvasives username. And so this is going to be your email address, the email address that you use when you signed up for your account, and as well as your password. If you don't already have an account set up, you can go to our website, imapinvasives.org, and click on login or register, and you can fill out that sign up form that I showed already online. Or you can click on this little blue hyperlink where it says create account or reset password. That will take you to the same place, but just right here within the app. Okay, the next thing you're going to want to do, this is really important. Don't forget this part because this is really valuable as far as making sure your app is updated, is clicking on this green button that says retrieve IMAP list. That is going to pull in our most updated species tracked list, our organization list, and our projects list. That gets updated and changed periodically. And so by clicking on this retrieve IMAP list button, that's going to pull in the most updated of each of those lists into your app. So it's important to recognize that the app is not directly connected to the database itself. And so this button, retrieve IMAP list, is essentially making that connection for a static moment in time so that you can get that most updated information pulled into your app. Hope that makes sense. Also, then you have the option of how your species list is going to show up when you're actually creating observation data. So here I have both selected. I have scientific and common. You can choose one or the other. So maybe you only want scientific names to pop up, or maybe you only want common names to pop up. I choose both just because it's really important that you're choosing the species that you want to choose. And sometimes some species can be known by multiple common names. So if you only choose common, you might know a species by multiflora rose, for example. I'm going to pick on multiflora rose again. That has multiple names. And so we might have it as one name, multiflora rose and IMAP, and you know it as another name. And if you're looking for that species name in your list, you're never going to find it because we don't have it under the name that you know it as. But if you have the scientific turned on, you can also double check and make sure that it says Rosa multiflora, which is the scientific name, and that's going to be the same no matter what. I don't always just have scientific because I'm not as fluent in all my scientific names yet as I'd like to be. So having the common names pop up is really helpful as well. That's all personal preference. So whatever you choose is fine. Then you have the option to make a custom species list. And I'm just going to go through here and just uncheck anything that I've already got checked because I think I may have had some other things on here already. But essentially, the custom species list is a way to narrow down what pops up on the big list when you're creating an observation record. Apologize, just give me a moment here to make sure I don't have anything else checked on here. Okay, yeah, we're looking good. So you can see this is a really long list as I'm scrolling through here, over 400 species that we currently track. So if you know that you're only searching for one or two species for a particular survey, or if you're pretty sure you're only going to find a certain amount of species, you can go ahead and just check those on this list. And that will narrow down the list then that shows up when you're creating an observation record. So I'm just going to choose a few here, just as an example to then show you a little bit later on. Okay, it's going to ask you for picture quality. I always have mine set to 50%. That seems to be fine. It also gives you the option to save your photos that you take with your app to your device's photo library if you would like to have them in both places. I don't have that turned on right now on my app, but you can if you want to on yours. Then we also have the option of how you want your default base map to show up, whether that's satellite aerial imagery or road imagery. Think of what it looks like in Google Maps, and that's going to be similar to what it's referring to here. The default map zoom, I don't generally do anything with that. I keep that set as is. The measurement system, again, just set that to US. If you know you're going to be collecting data and tagging it to a particular project, you can go ahead and select the project here that would be most relevant. Again, make sure that you're clicking that Retrieve IMAP List button, that green button up here, because that's what's going to populate the project drop-down list that I look at right here. If I don't click that Retrieve IMAP List button, this project list is going to be blank. And I have had a lot of people contact me before and say, hey, I'm trying to add data to a project, but nothing's showing up in my project list. That's why you need to make sure that you're clicking on that Retrieve IMAP List button. And you also already have that data affiliated in your account in IMAP Online. That's the other thing that's important to do. You want to make sure that's all set up in your account online, and then you can pull that data into your app. Same thing with your organization. Want to make sure that you're affiliating your account with an organization. You've already done that in the online database. That's set up. Then you pull that data into your app using that Retrieve IMAP List button. And then that will show up here on your app that you can choose to select that. So once you've had a chance to fill in all of that information, you want to go ahead and say save at the very bottom of that. And now you have all your preferences set up. And to tell you the truth, that might be the most time-consuming part of the app that you'll work on. The actual creating of an observation record is very quick and easy. So we're going to go ahead and click on Add Observation in the upper right corner. And then the first thing you're going to want to do is to take a photo, whether that's a photo that you are taking there in the field where you would then say take photo using camera, or if you already have a photo that you just took, maybe like a few seconds before, and it's saved in your device's library, you can go ahead and say select photo from library. So those are your options. That photo will then populate there at the very top. And just know that currently this particular app only allows you to save one photo per observation. We are working to get that changed so you can have more photos that you save to each of your records, but right now it is limited to one. So thinking back earlier to the few slides where I was talking about the importance of taking photos of distinguishing characteristics of a species and getting up close, make sure that your one photo is really good. It's up close, clear, crisp, and showing the distinguishing characteristics that we're going to need to confirm your record. Just as a side note, the Survey 123 app, I believe you can add up to 5 images per record. So that is a nice thing that app currently has. So if you'd like to use the app because it can, the Survey 123 app, because it can have more images, certainly feel free to do that. So this is sort of a limitation on this app right now, but we hope to change that soon. So I'm going to uncheck the custom list for now, because you'll remember we set up a custom list in our preferences. Here's the species list. So again, here's all 400 plus species that we currently track. And that's a pretty long list. But if I check on my custom list, now you'll see that the species list is short, and that's based on what I chose in my preferences. Again, that's thinking through ahead of time, what are you going to be looking for, or what are your target species that you're anticipating to find. So you can use that custom list however you want to. So you go ahead and just click on the species that you observed. And then here, actually, it's saying, did you detect this species or did you not detect this species? Was this a presence finding or was this a not detected absence finding? And so you can choose between either. Again, there is value in recording that not detected / absence information. So feel free to add that as well. We'll just go ahead for now and say that we did detect this species. The observation date will automatically default to today. So that will automatically fill in for you. If, for example, you are adding information into your app that maybe you saw a few days ago, you can go ahead and click on that date and modify that date as needed. Right now, there is a bug in the map part of this mobile app where it's not showing up. Generally, if you have an internet connection, the map will appear, and I had mine set to the aerial satellite imagery. Right now, that's not showing up. We're working at getting that fixed. So hopefully that will be changed soon. But your GPS is still functioning just fine on your phone. So that's the really cool thing about these apps is you don't have to figure out where you are. Your GPS does that for you. The nice thing though is when you have the map, you can confirm that because you can see where you are. But for now, trust that your GPS is working. Double check it after you submit the record just to make sure that everything landed on the map where it's supposed to. So just don't worry about the map being white for now because we're working on that. Your GPS is still working just fine. It will also give you the location of where you are so you can see your coordinates. Here's the place where you can tag your record to a project. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. But again, if you're submitting information as part of a group or you have your own project that you have reasons to set that up and tag your data to that, here's where you would select the project that you want to tag that to. You can leave that blank though if you want. Your organization will pre-populate, again, based on what's in your preferences. A project would also pre-populate in your preferences if you had one set up. I did not choose one, that's why this is blank. Then it's going to ask you for the time search. So how many minutes did you spend searching for the species that you found in the area that you looked? So we'll say I spent about 5 minutes searching there. Now it's going to ask for the size of the area where you found that invasive species. This is just going to give you some general estimates so you can choose what is most relevant. It may not be exact, but just go ahead and choose what you think is closest. Excuse me. And then you can also choose the distribution of that species that you found, whether it was a single plant, there is a bunch that were scattered, there's a whole bunch and they're pretty densely populated. The whole area is just covered, it's a monoculture, or it's literally scattered like along a road or a trail or maybe a riparian corridor. So again, choose what is most relevant to your finding. And then at the very end, it's going to give you the option to add any comments that you would like to add. So that could be anything. You could talk about the harm that you're seeing being caused to some native species in the area. If you're with a group of people, you can mention that I'm with a group of people and here's who they are. You can mention if it was difficult to get to that location and you had to go through a locked gate and climb up a really steep hill, you can mention that. Anything that you think would be valuable to add in your comments, feel free to put that in there. You don't have to add anything if you don't want to, you can leave that blank. Once you've filled in all that information, go ahead and click on save. Now that record that you just created is going to live on the home screen here on your app. At this point, you can do one of two things. You can keep adding additional observations, and there really, as far as I know, is no limit to how many observations you can put in here. So you can keep adding and adding and adding, and these will just keep kind of building on your home screen that you'll see row after row after row of observations. When you're ready to then upload your data, because right now it's not in the database, it's just on your app. So you'll want to go ahead and click on that little checkbox that's there on the right-hand side. And if you have a bunch of records, it would take a long time to check all the boxes. So what you can do is click on the menu and say, select all. That will automatically check all the boxes for all the records that you're ready to upload. So once you check the boxes next to the records that you want to upload, go back up again to the main menu and say upload selected. There'll be a box that says, are you sure you want to upload this record? You say, okay. You'll get a little moment's notice saying, please wait, this is uploading. And then you'll get a notification that says uploaded. Go ahead, log into Imap, and you'll be able to see your uploaded records. And if you say okay to that, you'll notice that then your app is blank again. That record disappeared. That's a good thing. It now left your app. It's uploaded into the database. It's listed as an unconfirmed record that will then go in our queue that will then be reviewed by an expert and then hopefully later on confirmed. So that's the process that you'll follow when using this particular app. Remember that it only will log presence and not detected information and points only. If you want to be a little bit more advanced with the data that you collect, check out the Survey 123 app. That will allow you to collect presence, not detected, and treatment information, as well as points, lines, and polygons, and up to 5, I believe it's up to 5 images per record that you can add into each observation. So that's pretty much the mobile app in a nutshell. Again, I recommend checking out our YouTube recorded videos if you want to rewatch this, or if you have questions and you want to refresh on something. And folks can certainly always reach out to me too if you have any follow-up questions or you get stuck somewhere. So hope that was helpful for folks. Apologize that I went a half an hour over. I always am such a poor judge of how long I'm going to take. Hopefully that wasn't too much over for folks, that they still had time to stay on and watch that. But thanks everyone. I appreciate your attention.
Thanks again, Amy, for a wonderful training today. I know that I learned a ton from this webinar. We hope that everyone enjoyed the training. And if you have any questions after, please feel free to reach out to me or Amy Jewett, and we would be happy to get you what you need. And then also, please keep an eye out for our follow-up email, which will include a link to the evaluation. And a recording of the training and a copy of the PowerPoint will be provided to everyone in the next few days. So keep an eye out for that. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you for all the great work that you're doing out there in the field. Amy, did you have anything else that you wanted to add quickly before we sign off?
I think that's it. Again, I just reiterate, and I'll try to put my contact information back up here on the screen. So if folks want to reach out to me, they can. I'm trying to see how I can share my screen here really quick. So yeah, if folks want to reach out to me and have questions, I'm happy to do that and talk more through anything that anyone might need. So feel free to reach out.
All right, thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.